Hello, my name's Carly Literal, and I conducted this life interview with my grandfather, Stewart Worthley. He was born on November 9th, 1933 in West Hartford, Vermont. So I explained the different theories of successful aging to him, and his views align most closely with the selection optimization and compensation model, which really emphasizes adapting to changes, and he thought that was really significant in the role of successful aging. But he also thought that the lifelong course perspective was accurate as well. He didn't see aging as a static snapshot, that different ages, different time periods are really important. You need to take the rest of your life into account. For example, he does struggle with some hearing loss, but he thinks he's adapted well to his aging-related changes. He's accepted this change in hearing ability, and he still pushes himself to do whatever he can in life. He said that he tries to stay purposely busy and helpful to anyone and everyone. He's about a year from being 90 years old, and he still designs building. He does pretty intense yard work. He helps his neighbors. He volunteers. So on the left here are pictures of my grandparents' garden, which is just fabulous. They own several acres of land. They've been in the local garden show numerous times. So over in the middle on the top, they have a gazebo that he built. It's a gazebo that also functions as a boat, and you can ride it around the pond. There's a garden shed there with the pointy top. He's made several great things for their garden. It's super fancy, super cute. They take care of all those acres themselves. I also mentioned some neurological changes associated with aging that were emphasized in the research papers. And he said that he has some short-term memory struggles. He said that he tends to forget names. But he admitted, I guess it's because I never really try to remember names. I'm sure a lot of people will make a conscious effort, and I don't really do that. But although he said that he has short-term memory struggles, he really doesn't. My grandmother explains that what he's talking about, he's been in his business for 40 years, and when he says struggling to remember names, it's maybe some man that he met at this church that he was building 2 decades ago, and he can't remember every person's name on that team. And he said that he can usually remember the most friendly person and the least friendly person, but he just can't remember everybody's names. And that's just crazy to me. His memory's far better than mine. I've worked with people for months and still forgotten their name. I also spoke about some different cognitive changes related to aging, and he said that he doesn't really struggle with much of that. He takes a lot of preventative measures. He reads 3 or 4 books a week, and not just little novels, big, thick books about history. He and my grandmother complete jigsaw puzzles all the time. He does the Sudoku puzzles in the newspaper every morning, and he still designs buildings. He has fabulous physical health as well. This one study here stated that absence of cardiovascular diseases have been shown to lead to reduced risk of cognitive decline. And Stewart said that he has the blood pressure of somebody my age, and I'm 24, and he really does. He has really great physical health. He doesn't take any kind of daily medications or anything at almost 90 years old. At the bottom here are some pictures of him building a caterpillar house that he donated to the local public library. I also spoke with him about some mental health problems that a lot of older adults struggle with. This one study here stated that depressive symptoms are prevalent in 8 to 16% of community-dwelling older adults, and that's not even considering people in nursing homes or hospitalized or anything like that. So when I asked him if he struggled with any mental health problems such as anxiety or depression, he said no, none. And here's a little clip from our discussion with that.
No problem at all with that. I don't have any what you call stress. There's business deals, and you wish you could do this and that, and I've got 3 little projects on the board right now, and can't do anything about them economically or permit wise. But I don't get stressed over it. Those are things you can work out over time, or the good Lord will take care of it. So that's the way I go about my business.
My grandmother also added that my grandfather has a real appreciation for retirement. He loves being outside. He appreciates that he can eat and sleep at whatever time he prefers, and he's very grateful. And then Stewart added that he is very satisfied with life.
No.
So here are some of the life interview questions that I asked him, if you want to pause and look through these. So his childhood, he was born again November 9th, 1933 in New Hartford, Vermont. He was the third of 4 children. He had 2 brothers and 1 sister. They grew up in a very nice New England bungalow, is how you describe it. His mother was from Canada and his father was from Vermont. And in Vermont, his father owned a general store about a mile away from their house, and he was also the postmaster in that store a couple hours a day. And I asked him about his grandparents. His only living grandparent was his grandfather on his mother's side, who farmed and he worked in asbestos mines in Quebec. He lived to be in his 90s, and he mentioned that his grandfather would bring home softball-sized chunks of asbestos and for the kids to play with. And as a child, he would play with this, and he said that he remembered pulling the strings off of it. And up in the right is a picture of asbestos, if you don't know what it looks like. When he was 13 years old, he said that they moved to Oregon after his father's store was ruined by a flood. His grandparents followed them up for a year, but then they moved back to Vermont. But in Oregon, they had a farm. He mentioned milking cows before school, and he would drive 2-ton farm equipment at 8 years old because this was around the time of World War II, and his father couldn't get any young men hired to work on the farm because they were all at war. Here's a little clip of him talking about that.
Had to be done. A lot of times, when Dad was trying that farming, I'd get up and help him out in the milk house or milking cows, and then run in and maybe change my shirt and get ready to get on the school bus. That was before we went to school. And the minute you got out of school, there was all kinds of chores that had to be done. So it was a whole different way of living. I don't remember ever being able to, and know that I even wanted to desire to go play baseball or do something like that. Don't remember ever having the idea, but those are just things that were different now than they were then. You had chores to do.
And he said that he joined TFA, which was Teacher Farmers of America, in high school, and they went to nationals in Kansas City. But he said when high school ended, there wasn't really a continuation of that program, so he kind of dropped that then. Over on the left is a picture of my grandfather and some of the men in his family tree. He's the one with the red circle around him. So adulthood and identity. Stewart and his friend were drafted for the Korean War, but his friend was first rejected when they went to have their physicals for being married. So he went somewhere else in California, and this time didn't mention being married, and he was accepted. And that very same day, they wound up in Cable, Kentucky from California for basic training. They decided to join the paratroopers because they paid $50 more per month than the regular Army. However, in basic training, Stewart got hurt from carrying a machine gun tripod, so he had some paralysis on the left side of his body. But he was in the regular outfit for about 2.5 years, and he was featured in Life magazine during that time, which there's a picture of that over on the right there.
When you were jumping out of those were C-47s then, and they were very narrow airplanes, and they had a door on both sides on the tail end of that airplane. And there was what was called a jump master, a sergeant, that would stand between them doors, and he would tap the two lines of troops coming down towards those doors to jump. And he'd tap you, and you'd go out the door, and then he'd tap the guy on the other side. The reason being that if you didn't go one after the other, and both of you went out at the same time, one of you would suck the air out of the other guy's chute and cause a malfunction. And that's what happened. The other fellow hesitated and fell into my chute. And he grabbed on like an alligator boy. And we rode it to the ground together.
I also asked him what his fears have been throughout his life, and he said as a child he was afraid of water. When he was with his brother would keep dunking him under the water, and he developed a fear of water. As a young adult, he said he was afraid of the Lord because he's always been a bit of a workaholic, and he was working a lot and focusing on his family, and kind of strayed a bit from the church. But he got back into that, and even now he's still pretty religious. And now he said that he doesn't have any fears, that he's not afraid of passing away like a lot of older people are, because it's laid out in the Bible. When I asked him if there was anything that he's always wanted that he hasn't gotten, he said that he has always wanted a really nice truck. He told me that he bought a nice new pickup truck about 3 weeks ago, and there it is on the right there, the big maroon truck. But he's owned a fancy red antique car in the past as well, and there it is above the truck, that bright red car. He mentioned that he's traveled to every U.S. state except for Maine, Hawaii, and Alaska. And he said, I went through life thinking I could do anything, and I pretty much did. So aging, I asked him about his schedule today, and he wakes up at 6 a.m., makes coffee, reads the paper, and does the Sudoku, talks to customers on the phone, walks the dog, and does yard work. He mows, cuts down trees, trims bushes. He drives backhoes, tractors, four-wheelers, riding mowers, the golf cart. He still designs buildings, reads books. I explained the concept of the reminiscence bump, and I asked Stewart what ages he remembers the best and what ages he considers the best years of his life. And he said he remembers his 50s and 60s and up through his 70s the best, which 50s, 60s, 70 years old, not 1950s through 1970s. He said that these have been his best years, too, because his best years have been since marrying Ruth, my grandmother. And my grandmother also said her 50s and up. She mentioned that then her children were grown, she had some freedom, some free time. But this was really surprising, because these answers are far different than what the reminiscence bump states, which is a theory that adults recall the most events from the second and third decades of their life, 20s and 30s, than any other periods. And one of the hypotheses was that, especially in America, these are promoted as your best years, going to college, partying, getting an adult job, and having a family, getting married. So that was really surprising to me. I also asked if he wishes he would have done anything differently to prepare for aging. I mentioned like physical activity, mental activity, staying out of the sun. And he's always been very active and healthy. He said, yeah, staying out of the sun, though. He would use the backhoe shirtless. But then they didn't even know about the dangers of the sun. Sunscreen wasn't even invented yet. So I don't think he really could have done much about that. I asked him what he thought made up a good life or successful life. And both my grandparents said, it sure isn't how much money you have. And my grandfather said, having true friends, being happy with yourself, and not fighting your living situation. His advice in life was to make some real, genuine friends. He said that he's had 41 different mailing addresses in his life, so it's been kind of hard to make and keep friends, long-term friends, and when you're moving around that much. But he said, I feel like I'm perfectly happy with where I'm at because of how I brought up and the life I've had. Over on the left are some pictures of him celebrating his birthday. And over on the left in the middle there is my grandfather, my aunt, and my grandmother. So some of the things I've learned from this class and this life interview, the aging scientists should have incorporated the opinions of the elderly into their concepts of aging. One of the studies I read mentioned this, that these people just kind of came up with these ideas of successful aging without really even asking older adults what they thought was successful, what made a good life, what makes you happy in old age. And I now have a much more positive outlook on aging, as I said. The studies I read about physical brain changes, cognitive decline, and mental health struggles, those things aren't inevitable, and in fact, they can be entirely prevented or reversed, such is the case with my grandfather. He doesn't struggle with any of those things. But however, if they do occur, optimism and acceptance of these changes are key. My grandfather's very optimistic. And I think a lot of his success in these areas, he reads and works, completes puzzles, he engages in a lot of physical activity, and I think those are very important in maintaining brain health. I think those have really led to his success in later life. In addition, something that was really emphasized was that enjoying your work plays a huge role in life satisfaction and enjoyment. I've always heard that if you make your hobby your job, you'll end up hating both. Your hobby's now not enjoyable and your work's not enjoyable, so don't try to do that. Just make work work, and it doesn't have to be anything that you would do in your free time. But Stewart is really a testament to that, because even years after retiring, he's still doing what was his job for decades. He loves it. So that has really changed my perspective there. Also, the reminiscence bump isn't always true, and the best years of your life aren't always your early years. I really appreciated hearing this. It makes me optimistic for the future and gives me some optimism about aging and things that I'll experience in later years. I'm glad to hear that my 20s aren't definitely going to be my best years, because they could be a lot better right now, you know. So I really have a lot more optimism for late life and how things will be then, and I have some kind of instructions laid out for how to have a successful life and what you need to do to enjoy your later years. So this class and this interview have been really helpful to me to understand aging and successful aging as well. Here's my works cited page. Some of these are what I use to explain the concepts to my grandparents.